We just want to know what happened and why our baby didn't come home.
A grand jury is stepping in, and every single phone is about to be downloaded. Weeks after Nolan Wells lost his life on Horn Island, his family's legal team has just revealed that key witnesses are officially refusing to cooperate with law enforcement. Let's listen directly to the attorneys and the family who just came out of a critical meeting with the DA.
Good morning. I'm Attorney Ben Crump, along with Attorney Lisa Park, Attorney Eric Herz, Justin Preston, and Cliff Jones. We have the honor of representing the family of Nolan Wells. We have present with us his mother and father, Christine and Elmore. We've just had an opportunity to meet with District Attorney Angel McGrath and some members of her team. We had a very respectful meeting. The thing I assume some of you may know, the thing to announce, she shared with the family that there will be a grand jury that she will turn this case over to once they have collected all the information and finished their investigation. We also agreed that we will have a mutual inspection of the cell phone with our experts and their experts. Attorney Eric Herz is helping lead the investigation team with former law enforcement experts who are going to help us with the cell phone download. So everybody will be able to see at the same time what the cell phone has. We also talked about trying to make sure we dot every I and cross every T. I know that we're getting about 50 calls a day to 100 calls a day from people who were there on Horn Island, people who are familiar with individuals that were there on Horn Island. And so we continue to be steadfast in trying to get to the truth of why Nolan Wells is dead. At this time, we'll have Attorney Herz say a few words, and then Christine and Elmore will just talk about the homegoing services and celebration for Nolan, and then we'll take a few of your questions. Attorney Eric Herz.
Thank you. Right now, there's a lot of unanswered questions. We appreciate the district attorney meeting with us, but because of certain types of confidentiality that even the victims are not allowed to know, we did not get all the answers we want. We have an independent investigation going on that involves former law enforcement, federal agents that are going to be looking into all the different information we got. The calls are coming in and we're getting a lot of information. Some of the people that I spoke to are not talking with law enforcement here. We're going to be trying to get them to cooperate with each other because we want to make sure the narrative, which has been put out that is false, is going to be corrected. So at this point, we just ask everybody to keep calling in if you have any information and let us know. And I personally, if we validate you're a legitimate call, we'll call you and talk to you. And I thank you all for showing up today.
And now, Christine and Elmore will just share with you some details of the homegoing celebration for their son.
Hello, everyone. So, the homegoing celebration, the funeral will be held at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs. It is going to be, visitation will be 9 to 11, and then the funeral will start after that. The plan is for the repast because, again, we want to celebrate Nolan. And he would not want us to be sitting around crying and eating. And so what we're going to do is kind of have a party to celebrate him, and that'll be held at the Jackson County Fairgrounds. So we really do want to keep it for family and friends. We are going to allow media to come in as well, and lastly, I just...
His teammates.
Oh, absolutely. Teammates. We've already contacted Coach Les George because we want to make sure that those guys are there. Former teammates from high school, middle school, teams that he played against. You guys are all welcome. But of course, we want to make sure that our families for sure and close friends get there. So I do want to just say for those of you, again, if you are having protests, even the day of his service, I am asking you guys to just keep it peaceful. Nolan would never want any type of violence or anything like that. He was not that kind of person. So if you guys would, again, just be peaceful. And to the community, thank you so much. Just the outpouring of love, support. We've had some local officials, Mayor Casey Vaughn from Gaucher has reached out to us. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you. He has, it's almost been every day. He's been texting to check on us. Also, Jeffrey Hullum, thank you so much. He's been texting pretty much every day. Receiving a lot of stories from Nolan's teachers, which just warms my heart, his classmates, teammates. So again, for those of you who have donated to the GoFundMe, once again, I stress, if you are not financially able to, we're not begging for that money, okay? If you're not financially able to, we understand. We thank you for whatever you can give, but if you cannot, if you would, just keep us in your prayers. And to his friends, stay strong, and please just take care of your mental health, because I know this is a lot. It's a lot for us, and I know you guys are feeling some of that too. So thank you all.
Are there any questions? Yes.
Attorney Crump, Skyler Henry here with CBS News. The last time that you spoke in a setting like this, I know you guys were hoping to get results back from an independent autopsy. I know you mentioned that Nolan had been sent to Washington, D.C. Is there anything to share on that front?
Not at this time, but we hope soon, very soon. Obviously, we're concentrating on the funeral services, but hopefully shortly thereafter, we will be able to tell some findings of the preliminary autopsy. Still waiting on some things. And also, while we're talking about funeral services, want to thank Mr. Tyler Perry for paying for the funeral.
Absolutely. As
well as Colin Kaepernick for helping to shoulder the expense of the independent autopsy. And I thank Reverend Al for agreeing to officiate the funeral services. Yes, sir.
Aaron Gilchrist with NBC News. Mr. and Mrs. Wansley, you said from the very beginning that for you, this was really about getting some answers about what happened to your son. Do you feel like after your meeting today, you have any more clarity on what happened?
Well, it was just a meeting where she talked about the process. She didn't tell us any information about the investigation too much, because those things are, as she said, her role and what she has to do. But they still have questions, and that's not insignificant to this meeting. It's just in general. Every morning they wake up and there's a hole in their heart, and they are trying to say, what happened to my son? Obviously, they feel strongly that he would not have just stayed behind. He wouldn't have left his cell phone. And so we're trying to get to those answers.
Attorney Crump, Brian Rose, GC Wire. There's been a lot of misinformation that's been spread online, especially the pool picture that was shared by you, and you had said that... Well,
I didn't share it, I reposted it. We're reposting everything. Let's make it clear. We're reposting everything because we're trying to get people to come in and call. And so we've said from the beginning, we're in a ferocious search for the truth. And so things out there, we are trying to post, ask people, do you know something about this? Let us know. Just because we repost does not mean that we authenticate anything. Look at our social media. We have always been very careful to say this is a repost, and we almost always give declaration that that's what it is, a repost. And so we want people to continue to call about everything, videos, whatever interactions they saw, and thank God we are getting dozens of people calling every day saying, I was on Horn Island, this is what I saw, I know these individuals, this is what we know. They said, we understand the sheriff's investigation has hundreds of people calling too. And so the hope is that when this is presented to the grand jury, all relevant witnesses and evidence will be presented to them so that we can have a fair and impartial investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. We were very honest and candid with the district attorney, and she was honest and candid with us. Our lived experiences tell us that we must question everything, everybody's role, law enforcement role. That is the lived experience of us as black people in America. And we will be not honoring the ancestors' sacrifices for us if we did not be honest every chance we got when we talk to power.
Eric mentioned the false narrative out there. Well, I've seen quite a few of those, so I was wondering if you could tell us which false narrative you're talking about so we can let people know it's not true. Was there a particular false narrative you were
There's a lot of narratives out there right now, and
There's a lot of narratives we're going to try to investigate on.
there's a lot of narratives out there right now. I'm not going to comment on any particular one, but whenever a case this big gets in the news, people try, for whatever motivations, law enforcement or whoever, people that call in, try to set up a narrative so that people will follow the narrative. Our job is to cut through all the noise and find the truth. And the truth needs to be found by unbiased investigation, as well as unbiased lawyers and all the people that are out here, all you investigatory journalists and everyone else. We just ask that you keep an open mind until we get to the truth.
And one of the things I will say, we are trying desperately to figure it out. And we don't profess to have all the answers, but what we're trying. And so when people call and tell us this is this person, and then we get somebody saying that, no, this isn't that person, we're trying to balance it all. So we want to even be more careful ourselves to make certain that we're trying to get people to come forward. And there are a lot of people who have different perspectives. We're getting that just from the phone calls, that people who were there at the same time are saying different things. But we're going to get there. We're going to get to the truth.
So first, I just want to say my deepest condolences to you, Christine, and Elmore. My heart hurts. I'm Brady McGill, WLOX here at home. But I want to go on and ask you, Attorney Ben Crump, you say that you were talking about the process in there with the DA. Were any affidavits or possible prosecutions or criminal actions presented to her to be signed eventually? Or do we know anything right now?
And as she said, her role is confidential at this point, but so she can maintain her prosecutorial independence. Obviously, I stressed to her very strenuously to say, we want you to zealously, you and the Sheriff's Department, to zealously investigate this matter. And Christine and Elmore share their life experiences too. We know through our lived experiences, our life experiences, and she said that's not how our office operates, but we know in America, in the South, certain people are investigated differently. And we shared that with her. We didn't, ask that she understand our perspective, but we said we should mutually try to understand each other's perspectives, where we're coming from. And we agreed that we would try to do that.
Where are we at in the investigation of Autopsy? We were supposed to get it back Friday.
Well, no, we like we said, we're waiting. Let the doctors do what they do. They ain't got their autopsy back neither, so we're trying to get it right. And then when we get it, we're going to share it. Yes, ma'am.
On Friday in the press conference, you said that you hear on the video Nolan saying, "This is my freaking phone. What are you freaking doing?"
That's what a witness told us, and that's what we reported out. Then another witness had come forward and said, no, that was his voice. We have other witnesses who said there were other altercations, so as Mr. Herz said, we're trying to go through it all and so forth. And we'll be even more careful to say this is what a witness told us in the future.
And so your team hasn't been able to look into that and confirm whether it was or was not Nolan?
No, we have audio people doing it, but we know certain people said it was him, and then certain people said it was not him.
Are you worried about the death threats and the violent kind of atmosphere on social media and how these fake videos and photos could play into that?
Oh my God, I saw a
Even
fake video.
with Nolan's friends getting death threats?
We don't want anybody's life to be in harm's way just because we're trying to get to the truth of what happened to Christine and Elmore's son. We saw fake videos about AI-generated videos of Christine, and it's just god-awful as they're grieving and trying to fight for the truth that they are also having to deal with these fake videos attacking them as they are just trying to literally bury their son next week. But we want everybody to say that we can go through this journey together for the truth. And even though we may have different viewpoints, we can all agree that everybody wants the truth. And nobody's life should be threatened for seeking the truth. Nobody should be, presumed accountable until we have evidence. His mother and father only want, and Christine has said it multiple times, she only wants what you would want. If this was your son, if this was your daughter, wouldn't you want desperately to get to the truth? Wouldn't you want people who were closest in proximity to what happened to be investigated and thoroughly investigated? We know that, if it was Nolan, how would he be investigated? So, one last question.
Really quickly, just curious about the dynamic that you guys have had, Christine and Elmore, with law enforcement up until this point. Have you all been able to speak with the sheriff, any of the lead investigators, since what happened last week?
So that was actually clarified in today's meeting. The DA's office wanted to take over that communications because they do have a victim advocate, which I appreciate, but of course that wasn't what she, took responsibility and accountability for. But we were not communicated with that information. So for us, like I said before, the last time we actually spoke to someone with the Sheriff's Department was last Tuesday. That was via text message that I initiated, just asking for an update. So that's the biggest thing is, I appreciate that she took accountability for saying, hey, that was actually our doing. But, we have a setup now, and so the hope is that we'll have that open lines of communication.
So you feel like this was useful today?
Attorney Herz has a comment on that there.
Let me just say that under the law in Mississippi, a victim is entitled within, I think it's 72 hours to get an incident report and to have certain information shared. It's been more than 72 hours, and that's part of the meeting here today to start getting the incident report and all that information that we came here to collect, as well as listen to the district attorney and what she had to say.
Did you get that report?
No, not yet. We are working with them to say there need to be better communications with the clients and so forth. So the big things that we know, there's going to be a grand jury into the death of Nolan Wells, and number two, that we're going to have a mutual inspection of Nolan's cell phone. We just want to make sure everybody else's cell phone is also being downloaded. Thank you.
Really quick.
A grand jury is coming. A cell phone that everyone has been talking about for weeks is finally about to be opened by both sides at the same time. And in the middle of all of it, the family's own legal team just stood in front of a bank of cameras and did something you almost never see in a case this high profile. They walked back one of their own most quoted claims. If you've been following this channel, you know the name Nolan Wells. A young man goes out to Horn Island, off the coast of Mississippi, with a group of people. He never comes home. And in the weeks since, this case has turned into one of the most talked about unresolved deaths in the country, not just because of what happened on that island, but because of everything that has happened since. The leaks, the photos, the theories, the accusations flying in every direction on social media. Today, there was a press conference, and I want to walk you through it piece by piece, because there is a lot here, some of it procedural, some of it emotional, and at least one moment that I think is going to matter more than people realize once the dust settles. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what's confirmed, what's still just a claim, what's now actively in dispute, and what happens next in the legal process. Stay with me, because we're also going to talk about something the family's attorneys revealed today that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention yet. AI-generated fake videos being used to target Nolan's own mother while she's grieving. Let's get into it. Before we get into today's developments, let's ground ourselves, because I know not everyone watching has seen every previous video on this case, and the people who have are still going to want the refresher. A case like this moves fast, and it's easy to lose the thread. Nolan Wells was a teenager whose death is currently the subject of an active, unresolved investigation. He was reportedly among a group of people on a trip to Horn Island, a barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, a place that's popular for boating, camping, and day trips, but also remote enough that there's no year-round law enforcement presence, no easy cell service in a lot of spots, and limited ways to get on or off the island outside of private or chartered boats. At some point during that trip, Nolan died. The circumstances of his death are still being investigated, and I want to be really clear with you here at the top. No cause of death has been officially confirmed publicly, no suspect has been named, and no one has been charged with any crime in connection with his death. Anything you hear in this video, or anywhere else, that states definitively what happened to Nolan Wells is, at this stage, someone's theory, not a fact. What we do know is that this case has generated an enormous amount of public attention. Part of that is the emotional weight of it, a young life cut short, a family desperate for answers. Part of it is the setting, an island, a group of people, conflicting accounts of what happened. And part of it, frankly, is the internet doing what the internet does with an unresolved mystery, filling in the blanks with speculation, screenshots, and, as we're going to get into later in this video, increasingly, AI-generated content. Nolan's parents, Christine and Elmore Wells, have retained a legal team that includes civil rights attorney Ben Crump, along with attorneys Lisa Park, Eric Herz, Justin Preston, and Cliff Jones. If you don't recognize all of those names, Crump in particular has represented families in a number of high-profile cases involving questions about how deaths were investigated, and his involvement here has helped keep this case in the national spotlight. The family has been pushing, publicly and repeatedly, for a thorough and transparent investigation. They've held prior press conferences. They've addressed rumors as they've come up. They've had to respond to leaked or reposted images, including a widely circulated pool photo we'll touch on later. And now, today, they held another press conference, this time immediately following a meeting with the district attorney handling the case, Angel McGrath. That meeting is what we're going to spend most of this video on, because it produced several concrete updates, and one significant walkback that I think deserves its own segment. Let's start with the procedural stuff, because it actually matters for understanding where this case goes from here. The press conference took place after the family and their legal team sat down directly with District Attorney Angel McGrath and members of her office. Attorney Ben Crump described it as a respectful meeting, his word, not mine, but worth noting because there had been real tension in prior weeks about the family feeling shut out of the process. Standing alongside Crump were attorneys Lisa Park, Eric Herz, Justin Preston, and Cliff Jones, as well as Nolan's parents, Christine and Elmore Wells. The format followed what's become familiar for this case. Opening remarks from Crump, additional detail from attorney Eric Herz, who's been leading the independent investigative side of things, and then personal remarks from Christine and Elmore, followed by a Q&A with reporters. I'm going to go through this in the order it actually happened, because the order matters. The procedural updates came first. The emotional and personal material came in the middle. And the most consequential moment, the correction to the earlier witness account, came out during the Q&A when a reporter asked about it directly. We'll get there. Let's start with what's actually moving forward in the investigation. According to Attorney Crump, 2 concrete developments came out of the meeting with DA Angel McGrath's office. First, this case is headed to a grand jury. Once the DA's office finishes collecting information and completes its investigation, the case will be turned over to a grand jury. For anyone unfamiliar with how this works, and I think it's worth taking a second to actually explain it, because grand jury language gets thrown around a lot in true crime coverage without much explanation. A grand jury is a group of citizens convened to review evidence presented by prosecutors and decide whether there's enough to bring formal charges. It is not a trial. There's no defense presentation in most jurisdictions, no cross-examination in the way you'd see in a courtroom drama. It is prosecutors presenting evidence, and the grand jury deciding whether that evidence supports moving forward with an indictment. The fact that this case is being sent to a grand jury doesn't tell us who, if anyone, will be indicted. It doesn't confirm a cause of death. It doesn't confirm foul play. What it tells us is that the district attorney's office is treating this as a matter serious enough to formally present to that body once their investigation is complete, which is itself a meaningful procedural marker, even without knowing the outcome. Second, there will be a mutual, independent inspection of Nolan's cell phone. This is significant because Nolan's phone has been a recurring point of tension in this case. Christine and Elmore have said publicly, and repeated again today, that they don't believe their son would have simply left his phone behind, that it doesn't match who he was. Whatever is or isn't on that phone has become one of the central pieces of physical evidence everyone is waiting on. What was announced today is that the download and inspection of that phone will happen with experts from both sides present. Investigators working with the family's legal team, led by attorney Eric Herz, alongside law enforcement's own experts, reviewing the data at the same time. Herz specifically noted that his side is working with former law enforcement personnel to make sure the family isn't relying solely on the sheriff's department's own analysis of the phone. This matters for a simple reason. In cases where there's already a trust deficit between a grieving family and the local investigating agency, having a mutual, simultaneous inspection, rather than the family waiting to be told secondhand what was found, is a meaningful step toward transparency, regardless of what the phone ultimately shows. Attorney Herz added some more color here too. He was candid that there are still a lot of unanswered questions, and he pointed to something that I think is actually a pretty important structural issue in this case. There are types of confidentiality protections that apply even to victims' families, meaning the DA's office is legally limited in what it can share with Christine and Elmore directly, even though they are the parents of the person at the center of this case. Herz described this as frustrating, but he was also careful not to frame it as evidence of wrongdoing, just a limitation of the process that the family has had to navigate. He also revealed something that gives a sense of scale for how much public attention this case is generating. The family's team says they're fielding somewhere between 50 and 100 calls a day from people who say they were on Horn Island at the relevant time or who know people who were there. That is an enormous volume of incoming information for any legal team to process. And it's part of why Herz says they're now working to get people who are talking to the family's investigators to also cooperate directly with law enforcement. Because right now, some of these callers are apparently only willing to talk to the family's side, not to the sheriff's department. That's a notable detail on its own. It suggests there's at least some segment of the public with information who trust the family's independent investigation more than they trust law enforcement in this case, which loops back into the broader theme of trust that's been present in this story from the beginning. I want to sit with this tip volume for a second because I think it's genuinely one of the more remarkable aspects of this case from a true crime standpoint. 50 to 100 calls a day is not a small number. For context, that's the kind of tip volume you typically see in nationally prominent missing persons or homicide investigations, cases that have saturated national news for months. And this is coming in not just to law enforcement's tip line, but specifically to the family's independent legal and investigative team. Attorney Herz described a two-track process happening in parallel. On one track, You have the official law enforcement investigation, moving toward a grand jury presentation, operating under confidentiality rules that limit what the family can be told in real time. On the other track, you have the family's own independent investigators. Herz described them as including former law enforcement and federal agents, collecting tips directly from the public, some of which apparently aren't making it to official channels at all. Herz was clear that part of the current effort is trying to get those two tracks to talk to each other, encouraging people who've called the family's team to also cooperate with the sheriff's department so that information doesn't stay siloed. He also said something worth flagging directly for you. He mentioned that some of the incoming information is aimed at correcting what he called a false narrative that's circulated about the case. He did not specify what that narrative is. Later in the Q&A, a reporter tried to pin this down directly, and Crump also declined to specify, saying only that there are a lot of narratives out there right now, and that their job is to sort through all of them to find the truth. I want to be straightforward with you about why I'm not speculating on what that unnamed narrative might be. It would be easy to fill that blank in with whatever theory has been circulating online, but the attorneys themselves didn't do that, and it wouldn't be responsible for us to do it for them. If and when that gets specified publicly, we'll cover it. Until then, we're not going to guess.
Okay, this is the part of today's press conference that I think deserves the most careful treatment, because it's a genuine correction, and in true crime coverage, corrections don't get nearly the attention that the original claim did. I want to fix that here. Some quick context for anyone who hasn't followed every update on this case. At an earlier press conference, the family's legal team relayed an account from a witness who reportedly said they heard Nolan say something like, "My freaking phone. What are you freaking doing?" in the moments before he went missing. That detail spread widely. It became one of the most repeated, most dissected pieces of this entire case online. People built entire theories around what that statement might mean, who he might have been talking to, what tone he might have used. Today, a reporter asked directly about that quote, and Attorney Crump's answer was notably more measured than the original claim had been treated online. He said that detail came from one witness. Since then, a second witness has come forward disputing it, saying that's not what happened or not what was said. Crump acknowledged that there have been other reported altercations as well, and that the team is now working with audio experts to try to actually verify whose voice, if anyone's, was captured saying anything like that, and whether it can be confirmed as Nolan's voice at all. Here's the line I want you to really pay attention to, because I think it's the most important thing said in the entire press conference. Crump said that going forward, they're going to be more careful to frame these details explicitly as "this is what a witness told us," rather than presenting them as settled fact. I want to slow down on this, because I think it's a really important moment, not just for this case, but for how all of us, including this channel, should be thinking about single witness claims in an active investigation. A single eyewitness account, especially one relayed secondhand through a family's legal team at a press conference, is not the same thing as confirmed evidence. It's a lead. It's a claim that needs to be checked against other accounts, against physical evidence, against forensic analysis where available. What happened here is a pretty textbook example of exactly why that distinction matters. One witness said one thing, it went viral, an entire secondary narrative built up around it online, and now a second witness disputes it, and the people who originally shared it are having to walk it back in real time, in front of cameras, while the family stands beside them. To their credit, the family's team didn't try to quietly bury this. They addressed it head-on when asked. That's worth acknowledging. But I also think it's a useful moment for anyone watching this channel to recalibrate how much weight to put on single-source viral claims in ongoing cases. Not just in this case, but in general. For our purposes, going forward in our own coverage of this case, we're going to treat that quote the same way the attorneys now say they will, as a disputed claim attributed to one witness, under active review, not as something Nolan is confirmed to have said. If the audio analysis the family's team mentioned ever produces a verified result, one way or the other, that will be a significant update, and we'll cover it as its own story when it happens. I also want to note something else here, because it's relevant to how this case has developed. Crump was asked, in the same exchange, about the viral pool photo that's circulated in connection with this case. He clarified that his team reposted that image, but did not authenticate it, meaning they shared it publicly asking if anyone recognized it or had information, not confirming it as verified evidence. He said their standard practice has been to label reposts clearly as reposts on their own social media, specifically so people don't mistake a request for information as a confirmed fact. Whether or not you think that distinction has come through clearly to the public, and honestly, based on how much theorizing has happened around that photo, I think it's fair to say the nuance got lost somewhere along the way. It's the explanation on record from the family's attorney, and it's consistent with the same theme running through this whole segment. Claims that get treated as fact online often started out as something much more provisional. This next part is something that, frankly, I don't think has gotten enough coverage relative to how serious it is. During the Q&A, a reporter asked the family's team whether they're concerned about death threats and the broader hostile atmosphere that's built up around this case on social media. The answer from Crump was blunt, yes. He said there have been countless people around the family receiving death threats. And then he disclosed something that I think needs to be said plainly and repeated clearly, because it's a genuinely disturbing detail. AI-generated fake videos of Nolan's mother, Christine, have reportedly been circulating. Think about what that actually means for a second. This is a mother who is, in Crump's words, in the middle of literally trying to bury her son next week, who is also having to contend with fabricated video content depicting her, generated by artificial intelligence, spreading online. That is not a hypothetical harm. That is not an abstract concern about the future of misinformation. That is happening right now to a specific grieving parent, in the middle of an active investigation into her child's death. I want to be careful here about what I can and can't tell you, because I haven't independently verified the content of those videos myself, and Nabuma isn't going to describe or speculate on their contents. That's not something we're going to do. What I can tell you is that a named attorney representing the family stated this publicly on the record at a press conference. That's a credible enough sourcing standard to report the existence of the claim, while being clear that the specific content of those videos is not something we're independently confirming or showing you. Crump connected this directly to a broader point that I think is worth sitting with. Nobody's life should be threatened for seeking the truth, and nobody should be presumed guilty of anything before there's actual evidence. He made a point of saying that Christine and Elmore only want what any parent would want in their position: a thorough, honest investigation into what happened to their son. That's a reasonable, almost universally relatable thing to want. And yet the environment around this case has apparently escalated to death threats and fabricated AI content targeting a grieving mother. If you take one thing away from this segment, let it be this. As this case continues to generate massive public interest, which, if you're watching this video, you're part of, the responsible way to engage with it is to push for real answers through real channels, not to participate in a rumor mill that's apparently already spiraled into harassment and fabricated content aimed at the people at the center of this tragedy. That's not a lecture. It's just where the facts of today's press conference actually point. Briefer update here, but an important one to track. The family commissioned an independent autopsy, separate from whatever official autopsy findings may exist through the state. That independent autopsy was sent out of state, reportedly to Washington, D.C., for review, and it's been funded, according to Crump, by Colin Kaepernick. As of today's press conference, those results are not back yet. Crump said they're hoping to have findings to share soon, but he didn't give a specific date, and he was clear that the immediate focus right now is the funeral. He said explicitly that they're still waiting, and that the family, like everyone else, doesn't have the autopsy results yet. I want to be really disciplined here and not fill in that gap with speculation about what an eventual autopsy might show. We don't know. Nobody watching this video knows. When those results come back, and they may not necessarily be made fully public even then, depending on how the family and their legal team choose to handle it, that will be a major update, and it'll get its own dedicated coverage. For now, the honest, accurate statement is simply, the independent autopsy has not yet been completed or released. This next section is, I think, an underrated part of today's press conference, because it's the most concrete, checkable, legally grounded claim made in the entire thing, and it points to a real structural problem in how this family has been treated procedurally, separate from any question about what actually happened to Nolan. Attorney Eric Herz stated that under Mississippi law, a crime victim, which, under most state victims' rights statutes, extends to immediate family members in a death case, is entitled to receive an incident report and certain baseline information within a specific window. Herz cited that window as 72 hours. He stated plainly that more than 72 hours have now passed, and the family still has not received that incident report. This is worth separating out from everything else in this case, because it's not a matter of competing witness accounts or disputed claims. It's a statement about a specific legal entitlement and whether it was met. If accurate, it represents a real procedural failure independent of anything else going on in the investigation. And it's the kind of claim that's straightforward to verify against Mississippi's actual victims' rights statute. Christine added personal detail here that I think matters for understanding the family's frustration. She said the last time anyone from the sheriff's department actually communicated with them was the previous Tuesday, and that contact wasn't even initiated by the sheriff's office. She said she was the one who sent a text message asking for an update. Following today's meeting, the DA's office has apparently now agreed to take over as the primary point of contact for the family going forward, working through a victim advocate. Christine said she appreciated that the DA's office acknowledged responsibility for that communication gap. But it's worth noting the timeline here plainly. This acknowledgement, and the plan to fix it, came only after the family's legal team raised it directly in today's meeting, not proactively from law enforcement. I think it's fair to present this section of the update as one of the more concrete, actionable pieces of news from today's press conference, separate from the more contested claims we covered earlier. Whatever ultimately gets determined about what happened to Nolan Wells, the question of whether his family received basic legally mandated information about the case in a timely manner is a separate, checkable issue. And based on what was said today, the answer appears to be no, at least not within the statutory window.
Want to give some space here to how the family themselves are framing this experience, because I think it's easy, in a case with this much procedural detail and this much online noise, to lose sight of the fact that at the center of it are two parents who still don't know what happened to their son. A reporter asked Christine and Elmore directly whether today's meeting gave them any more clarity about what actually happened to Nolan. The answer, honestly, was no, not really. Christine described it as a meeting that was more about process than substance, which tracks with everything else we've covered. The DA's office is limited in what it can share while the investigation is ongoing. What she did say is that every morning, they wake up with what she described as a hole in their heart, still asking the same question, what happened to my son? She reiterated a detail we've heard before in this case, that they don't believe Nolan would have simply stayed behind on that island, and that he wouldn't have left his phone. Ben Crump also addressed a question about the family's broader relationship with law enforcement, and his answer touched on something bigger than just this one case. He said that the family's approach, questioning every institution, every role, pressing for information rather than assuming it will be freely given, comes out of what he described as the lived experience of Black Americans navigating the justice system. He was careful to frame this as the family's perspective and experience, not as an accusation against any specific individual investigator in this case. The DA reportedly told the family that's not how her office operates, and Crump said both sides agreed to try to understand each other's perspective going forward. I'm including this not to editorialize on it myself, but because it's a significant, on-the-record part of how the family's own attorney explained their posture throughout this process, and it helps contextualize why this family has pushed so hard for independent investigators, independent autopsies, and mutual evidence review at every step, rather than simply waiting on official channels. The second half of today's press conference shifted to something more personal, the funeral arrangements for Nolan. Christine described the service, which she and the family are calling a homegoing celebration, as being held at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs, with visitation from 9 to 11 in the morning, followed by the funeral service. Rather than a traditional repast, the family is planning what Christine described as more of a celebration of life gathering at the Jackson County Fairgrounds, framed explicitly around who Nolan was. She said he wouldn't have wanted people sitting around in mourning, and that they wanted to honor that. The service itself will be officiated by Reverend Al, and the funeral costs are reportedly being covered by Tyler Perry, separate from the independent autopsy funding provided by Colin Kaepernick. Christine specifically mentioned wanting Nolan's teammates present, former teammates from both middle school and high school, as well as players from opposing teams he'd played against over the years, and said the family has already been in contact with Coach Les George to help coordinate that. She also acknowledged the outpouring of community support the family has received, name-checking local officials, including Mayor Casey Vaughn and Jeffrey Hull, both of whom she said have been checking in on the family regularly. On the subject of any planned protests coinciding with the service, Christine asked directly and clearly for anyone attending or demonstrating nearby to keep things peaceful, stating plainly that violence isn't something Nolan would have wanted associated with his memory. She also addressed the GoFundMe that's been raising funds for the family, making a point of clarifying that they are not pressuring anyone financially, that if people are able to contribute, it's appreciated, but if not, prayers and support are enough. She closed this part of her remarks with a message directed at Nolan's friends specifically, encouraging them to take care of their own mental health through this, acknowledging that the weight of this loss extends well beyond the immediate family. So where does this case actually stand after today? Here's the concrete, verifiable state of things as of this press conference. The case is moving toward a grand jury, though no timeline has been given for when that presentation will happen. The cell phone, arguably the single most anticipated piece of evidence in this entire case, is set for a mutual, simultaneous inspection between the family's experts and law enforcement's experts, though no date has been announced for that either. The independent autopsy results are still pending, with no firm timeline beyond soon. And the DA's office has taken over primary communication with the family going forward, following the acknowledged 72-hour reporting gap. At the same time, one of the most viral claims associated with this case, the alleged "my freaking phone" statement, is now officially disputed and under audio review, rather than treated as confirmed. That's a meaningful shift, and if you've shared or discussed that detail in the past based on earlier reporting, this is worth knowing. And running underneath all of it is something that deserves ongoing attention on its own. A grieving family dealing with death threats and AI-generated fake content, in the middle of an already painful, high-profile loss. I'll be tracking every one of these threads as they develop: the grand jury process, the cell phone inspection, the autopsy results, and any further clarification on that disputed witness account. If any of those produce a significant update, that'll be its own dedicated video, not buried in a general roundup, because each of those is genuinely significant enough to stand on its own. Here's what I want to leave you with. This is a case where the facts are still actively moving, including facts that were reported as settled just weeks ago and are now openly being revised by the very people who first shared them. That's not a reason to disengage from the story. It's a reason to be more careful about how we engage with it. If you were on Horn Island around the time of Nolan's death, or you have information you believe is credible and specific, not a rumor, not a screenshot pulled from somewhere online, the tip lines for both the family's independent investigators and local law enforcement are linked in the description below. Please don't leave that kind of information in the comments here. It won't reach the people who need it, and it just adds to the noise this family has already had to deal with. If this update was helpful in cutting through some of what's circulated online, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because there will be a next one, likely more than one, as the grand jury process, the cell phone inspection, and the autopsy results all move forward. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next update.